Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Allison. I'm a developer marketing manager here at Observable, and we are so excited for this discussion on art and science, blending creativity and data analysis in data visualization. It is really awesome to see so many people calling in from all over the world. It's really great to see people dropping a hello and wherever you're calling in from in the chat. So please keep adding, wherever you're calling in from. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and we will go ahead and jump in. So I am going to be introducing our amazing panelists for this webinar in just a moment. But before I do, I just wanted to give you a few logistics real quick. So first, what to expect today. In just a minute, I'm going to introduce our three panelists, Kelsey, Tanya, and Shirley. And then we'll quickly dive into the conversation. And we expect that conversation to continue for about 30 to 35 minutes. During that discussion, we're also really excited to hear from you. I see that everybody has figured out how to add comments in the chat, which is great. We hope that you will continue to do that throughout the webinar today. So as we ask questions of the panelists and as you hear their responses, we're also really curious to hear what you all have to say. So keep the chat going. Feel free to drop your thoughts or questions or perspectives right in the chat to share with everybody. After we wrap up the discussion with our set questions, we're going to leave about 10 minutes for audience Q&A. You're welcome to either add your questions right in the chat throughout this call. We'll be starring them behind the scenes so that we have a list of the questions that people ask. Or you can hold off until the Q&A session and you can share your questions in the chat then. And we'll try to get through as many as we can in that 10 minutes that we have at the end for live Q&A. And finally, the last thing before we jump in is that this panel is going to be recorded. So if you have to hop early or if you want to come back and revisit any part of this conversation, registrants will get access to the recording so you can come back to it and rewatch any part at any point. Okay, without further ado, I am really excited to welcome our three panelists to the stage. So welcome, Kelsey, Tanya, and Shirley. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. So first with some intros. I think that these three are really well known in data viz and data art communities. But to introduce them, first up, we have Kelsey Nanan. Kelsey is a freelance data viz developer and adjunct professor at NYU. As a technical collaborator, she helps to communicate insights from data, helping clients to tell their story in ways that will resonate with their audiences. So welcome, Kelsey. It's really great to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me, Allison. So excited to be here.
Awesome. All right, next up we have Tanya Shapiro. Tanya is the founder and principal consultant of Indie Visual, where she works with clients to translate data into clear stories, smarter strategies, and tools that move their work forward. She previously worked as a senior data engineer and data scientist before shifting gears into full-time data visualization and faster reporting and dashboarding pipelines. So hello and welcome back, Tanya.
Hi, Allison. Thank you for having me. Excited to be part of this group today.
Great. And finally, Shirley Wu. Shirley is the creative director of Shirley Wu Studio, where she designs data experiences that communicate, inspire, and resonate. She is an award-winning data strategy and visualization expert, a software engineer, artist, and a published author. So really excited for this chat with you, Shirley.
Thank you so much for having me, and very excited for this panel. But thank you for putting it together.
Absolutely. So we're so thrilled that the three of you could join us for this panel because you all really capture kind of different balances of design and data analysis and creativity in your work. And to kick it off, I want to learn a little bit more about how you balance those things and how that balance shows up in your work. So the first question is, when you are starting a visualization project, do you approach it first as a designer or first as a data analyst or both? And how do those roles play off of each other throughout the course of a project? And maybe for this one, I will ask Kelsey to start.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for me, that answer changes from project to project, depending on, I think, who the project is for, like who the client is. I think if it's a personal project where I'm in full control of everything, like scope, data, everything, I come at it more, kind of design first. Like I'm so excited to kind of do whatever I want in some ways. Whereas if I'm on a client project, I think I'm much more analytically oriented at the beginning. And I think that's because I'm coming at it from, I'm one of the developers on the project. I'm the one who has to build the thing. So I come at it with a sort of, I think like cautiously optimistic, sometimes like very optimistic developer mindset, where I'm less just, the world is my oyster. And I'm like, let's think about technical constraints a little more. So yeah, depends on the exact project.
That makes sense. Yeah. Tanya, how about you? Role balancing designer or an analyst mindset as you approach a new project?
I feel like depends is the classic data scientist answer. There's so many times where it depends on context. And I would say oftentimes I'm wearing both hats and maybe at different phases of the project. I think of myself more as analyst first in the beginning, trying to figure out what the messaging is or the story. And then I think of myself more as the designer when I'm trying to translate that story into the right visual or the right medium, depending on who my audience is. So definitely both. And it's this fine balancing act of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we might be hearing it depends in a lot of different situations today in a chat about data viz and creativity and data analysis. So I'm glad we're starting off with that. A lot of gray area that's exciting to chat about. All right, and Shirley, what about you approaching as a designer analyst?
Yeah, so I can start with what not to do, which is what I did when I first started doing data visualization, which is I started out as a software engineer. So I approached with code first, and I was like, let me just dream up this fun technical challenge and then build it. And what happened was that I spent months just kind of building charts that don't work or visualizations that don't work. So definitively do not start with code first. And then I think from there, I got to work on an amazing project called Data Sketches with my friend Nadi Bremer, who I think I saw in the comments. And I think through that project, through kind of what I learned from Nadi, I learned to do data first, to analyze data first. Because over and over again, what I learned from my projects is I can come up with the funnest design, but when I plug the data in, the shape of the data just doesn't fit into the design very well. And I've learned to kind of at least do some light analysis from the very beginning, kind of figure out the outliers, the extremes. And then only once I get a little bit of a handle on what the data looks like, do I then go to the design, and then I kind of go back and forth between design and analysis. I would actually just call what I do like data exploration. And then I go back and forth between those. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like I have done this too, where like you get some new fresh data and it's so exciting that your first reaction is like, I'm going to build something. And so I'm like, I know how to code up this chart and I know how to tweak this thing. And it really is one of those things where it can be like moving a little bit slower, taking more time during that exploration phase can save you a lot of time once you do start building, when you have a clear of what you actually want to create on that costly coding side of things. Yeah. So, I mean, during that answer, each of you, I think, mentioned some ways like choices about how to communicate something to your audience. And I think that something that's always a challenge is when you have an interesting data set, you don't want to present it in all of the different ways you could possibly show it to somebody. You kind of have to like narrow down to picking like, this is what I think is the best chart type based on a number of factors. And my next question for you all is, given these many, many options that you have, how do you go about deciding and testing chart types or layouts when you're exploring a new data set? What does that process look like? And how do you kind of evaluate like when you think you have found the best option for a data visualization?
I mean, for me, I always think not only about, I think it's two parts. One is what's the message or question I'm trying to answer. Oftentimes I think I'm kind of like a business detective. I work oftentimes with like financial services industries, and I've got to be cognizant of the data literacy level of my audience and meeting them with the right graphic vernacular to convey that story. Because even when you think about like standard chart types, to me, a box plot might be a standard chart type, and it's the easiest way for me to show distribution. But for someone who's working in insurance, they probably don't understand a box plot right off the bat. So it's not the best way to show that, even if I think it's the right way, because I have to meet them where they're comfortable and how they interpret and understand charts. So I really think audience influences my decision, along with the question that I'm trying to answer.
I just wrote down business detective because I love that so much and would like to start calling myself a business detective. Shirley or Kelsey, any thoughts on like choosing a chart type? What other factors kind of influence how you make that hard decision?
Yeah, I feel like definitely what Shirley said, I think rings very true, where you're always starting with the data itself as well. So like audience data are two of the, kind of big influences in terms of how you're going to show the data eventually. And I think that's something that's happened along kind of my career. I think when I first started off, because I too am developer, I guess, initially / at heart, and you always want to think, oh, like I want to like use like code up some visualization. But I think a really great way of starting projects that I've kind of come to learn from designers I've worked with is using like low code solutions where you're kind of like, if you're allowed to, because sometimes it's client data you can't do that with, but if you can, using low code tools like Flourish, raw graphs, where you can just generate charts really quickly I hope I'm not frozen.
Nope, you're good.
To see, oh no, I am frozen. Okay,
no,
am I back?
fine.
Oh, you're not.
You're fine. Yeah.
So strange. Okay, I think you're a little frozen for me. Anyway, low code solutions to kind of quickly see the sketch of, okay, what would this data look like as a line chart, as an area chart? And I think doing that to get really quick iterations is such a valuable way to start off a project.
Yeah, and actually, to add on to that, I fully agree with both of what you said, especially along the line of client work of like how audience ultimately determines the visualization design. But then I think, Kelsey, what you said about, I think there is two parts of the design process for me. One that is I actually use Observable a lot. I'm not getting paid to say this. I use Observable a lot. And the initial phase where I'm working with clients to figure out what the story is that they want to tell. And so in that phase, I'm either using like as stripped down their observable plot charts as I can, or I'm just sketching my ideas to communicate that to the client. Then the second phase. And so with observable plot, it would be like what we would call the standard charts. But then in the second phase is when what I really enjoy is kind of like letting the creativity out there. Of course, that really depends on the comfort level of the client. But I really love thinking through the something I love as a concept is like visual metaphors of what does the data set represent? And then can we bring that in somehow? I've recently got to watch Lauren Klein and Tanvi. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't remember Tanvi's last name right now, but their amazing outlier keynote where they talk about how Playfair's charts are going for a very specific audience that want something to be quickly readable, but in doing so, it strips the context away from the data. And that, and then they gave an example of, I think, Elizabeth Peabody, Elizabeth, whose work was intentionally a little bit more abstract, a little bit harder to read, forces you to sit with it and reflect on it. And that's kind of, to me, what that visual metaphor exercise does also. And that's kind of the space that I kind of really love, of like, how do we bring, especially when the data set is about individual people, about human relationships. I love kind of pulling that part in. Yeah.
That's great. And I think, there's been a couple mentions of like the slower at the start, what does that process look like? And I love the mention of like by hand sketching is one of my favorite parts of thinking about data and data visualization. And I think also is a good way to force yourself to slow down a little bit and not get like stuck in a wheel of writing code right away, is just like quiet time, not online. Sketching is both like, I think, inspiring and fun, and forces you to slow down so you can go faster later on. Okay, so the next question, and I feel like this has been like woven through your answers already, but I am really excited to see some work from you all. So the next question is, how have your personal experiences or backgrounds influenced the creative choices you make? And can you share with us a piece that you feel like really highlights that personal influence or evolution in your data viz and data art? So does anybody want to volunteer to share some work first?
I'll go ahead. The question, definitely a little, I don't remember all of it, but I have my piece to share. Oops, oh my gosh, I slipped.
Careful.
Okay, I guess I'll say first about my personal background, I suppose. I don't know, and this is going to sound, I think, really lame, but I'm going to say it anyway. I feel like I've always been a really hard worker. Like in school, I was that kid who wanted to work really hard. And I've always felt like, when I think about this, I always feel like I'm pushing boundaries. I think in some teams I've worked on as well, shouts out like Data Viz Lab at McKinsey. I worked really closely with a lot of designers, and everybody was really encouraged to not just stick in their lane, but go beyond, right? Like, if I'm a developer, I can still, sketch, I can still design, I can still take part. And the designers were always, prototyping in code. It was such a great environment. And I feel like that really reflects in how, when I choose to do a personal piece, I take it as the opportunity to just really like, I think the nice way of saying it is like push all the boundaries, but I do know that sometimes it just becomes breaking all the rules, which I consider myself justified in doing because it's personal data. Like, this is what my data is saying. I know best, don't I? So with that, let me share my, I'll also zoom in on this, make sure that looks a little better. So at the end of last year, it's holiday card season. Everybody sends out their pictures and their updates for the year. And I thought, I should send out a Data Viz holiday card telling people how my year went. And last year was a pretty significant year for me. I tore my ACL earlier in the year. So the whole year was basically like surgery, physical therapy, really, really intense. And then I memorialized it with this essentially line chart, I guess, that looks like a ski slope. So breaking a ton of rules here. I don't care about the chart junk because I wanted this to look like a slope. My text, this is me at the top of the slope. I didn't do anything like this also. I was a bunny slope girl. But yeah, like you could see just this awful, there's an animated version of this too, where the stick figure collapses at the bottom here. But then, yeah, like all of these, like relearning how to walk, like I'm doing text that just is vertical, essentially just all over the place. You have to like turn your head to read it. But, it really reflects how difficult the journey was for this year, like ups and downs. Finally, this like very final, like, okay, yes, we're making it. We reached the top of the peak. notably, kind of in a better like physical shape than at the beginning of the year due to all that like intense physical therapy. But I love this. I love this because it really just captures what 2024 was for me. And I don't know, I think Data Viz was such a great way to do it. And I think breaking the rules just helped me like get across what a meaningful journey this was.
I love this. Thanks, Kelsey.
Mm-hmm.
I think that breaking the rules is so important because one of our designers here at Observable, Kina, who helps me when I create like disastrous first drafts of things, one time she made an adjustment and I was like, I didn't know you could do that. It was like putting a line exactly at the like center of the vertical or something. And she said, you could do anything you want as long as you know how you're breaking the rules and are doing it deliberately, which I think like as you start doing more data viz, you have the freedom to break rules and you have a good understanding of how those rules are being broken and why it still works. Love that.
Absolutely. Definitely. I shall. Yep.
Cool. How about, can I have Shirley? Can we check out your piece that you want to share next?
Yeah, I cheated a little bit, and I kind of want to show two pieces, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So kind of the context behind this is, in 2018, I created a piece about women Nobel laureates, and how there's only, I think at the time, 51 women Nobel laureates versus like 850 something male Nobel laureates in the 100 plus year history that the Nobel Prize has had. That made me extremely enraged. And it's become my kind of mission since to at least in my personal work, explore things that are topics that are meaningful to me, which tends to be about my identity as a Chinese American woman. And I love when I can work on clients on those topics as well. And then a few years ago, I decided to go back to grad school so that I can learn how to bring the data stories that we tell digitally, hopefully into a physical world. And what I got to kind of research and learn from that process is the freedom I found in creating work physically. And what I mean by that is specifically, I wanted to show this piece. It's a very, very, very personal piece. All my, I consider these my art or art data installation or just art pieces. The data sets themselves are usually extremely simple. This particular data set is my, I should have given a content warning. I'm so sorry. Content warning, fake blood. But this data set is my 2020 menstrual data. And what it is doing is it is doing a 30-minute performance of where this rectangular plate represents the 31 days of a calendar month. The circle is the moon phases. And as the piece performs, it is dripping red ink on the dates of the month that I had my period. And kind of the personal part of this is a little bit, kind of like an act of defiance against the shame that I felt as a teenager when my menstruations never came on the same days of the month, when I thought that, we've been told that it's, the time of the month that it should come on the same days. And I used to feel this like great shame that I thought that there was something irregular and weird about my body until I realized, like, of course they don't come on the same days because there's the months don't have the same number of days. So like, of course they never, and so this performance piece is kind of trying to show like how over the course of a year, my period kind of lands on almost every single date of the month. But the reason why I felt so much freedom in showing this physically instead of digitally is in the way that I was able to use this red ink, where I have these like, defined rectangles, but the ink refuses to fall within those rectangles. Like it goes, it splatters and it kind of like pulls in between, which is basically kind of the experience we have with our menstruation. It's a continuous process, a continuous multi-day process that feels weird when we kind of constrain it digitally into like the discrete pixel perfection. So this is like one of the pieces where my personal experiences really, really, really impacted how the piece turned out. I write a little bit about like also how there's data sets that we have that are emotional and messy and imprecise, and how can we kind of visualize that, and maybe it's about physicalizing that. And I think that this journey that I'm on is very much motivated by my personal experiences. I realize I've been talking so much about just one, so I'm going to really quickly talk about this second one. And so this one, actually, you know what? I feel like I've been talking too long, so I'm going to just say that I will.
Go for it, Shirley. This is really cool to see. So yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll try to be real. This, I think 2 months ago, I was able to put together a solo art show in Tokyo. The theme of it was about home, about places of belonging in the Asian diaspora, and specifically about what does it mean? What does home mean in our current age of global, interconnected global movement? Especially digital interconnectivity, and what does home mean and belonging mean when we can grow up thousands of miles away from our ancestral homes. And so there's this is actually my in progress write-up, but the place I wanted to kind of ground this art show in as like a starting point was in March of this year, we got the reports of the 238 Venezuelans that were deported from the U.S. And with no due process. And I kept on thinking about that and thinking about like, what does it mean to try and build a home in a place, maybe try to build a home where your ancestors did not grow up, to spend decades in a place and still, feel the threat of being deported or being deported. And then, so with this piece, the visualization is all of the countries I've lived in, represented as tree rings. And each ring represents a year lived in the country. And the links are essentially wind. Shout out again to Nadi for giving me this brilliant idea of like, the wind is kind of in every time I move internationally, the wind picks the seed off of a tree and replants it elsewhere is the way that but then what I do with this is watercolor silk screen onto washi paper. What I do is I then drip water onto the part of that is the US, the tree rings that are my time in the United States. And I drip water over the course of 2 hours, according to Google Trends data, for the word deportation from 2016 to 2025. And over time, the print wears away and the paper also starts to wear away. And so this kind of, mentioning earlier about Elizabeth Peabody and giving something a little bit abstract and not explaining absolutely everything. This is an attempt to kind of share how I felt without kind of being in your face with it, or being in your face with the story of it, maybe. Thank you so much. I'm gonna remove that now.
Thank you, Shirley. Those are really incredible. And I think it like also combines so many things, like a lot of like mechanical engineering also that like, and
Very light.
2D to 3D. Really incredible to see those really personal pieces. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for being encouraging. It's very, very personal and vulnerable feeling still. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it. Those are, yeah, really, really cool and interesting to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Tanya, a piece that you want to share that you think highlights your perspective or evolution in data viz?
Absolutely. Can I first just say how insane the creativity is on this panel? It's just off the charts seeing both of your work. I guess starting off, just kind of sharing a little bit about my personal background. I had a very unconventional route into data viz, and I'm sure that probably echoes for many people. You know, some people don't wake up and say, I want to do data viz. It's like, I fell into it because I did this or X, Y, and Z. And I studied hospitality management of all things, thinking I was going to go work in hotels. I'm not working in hotels today. But my first creative outlet was actually guitar. You can see my Les Paul collecting dust in the background. And just kind of sharing the anecdote of how I started learning guitar was you first start by learning covers of songs, right? You learn Stairway to Heaven, classic, Blackbird, all of these things, 4-chord songs, and you start recognizing patterns. And I also fell into songwriting. You know, at one point when I was 16, I was like, I want to be in a band and I want to go tour the world. So I was writing my own songs. And what I often did was I would find things that I liked from one song that I learned how to play. And you would start sampling things and then piecing it together. And that's what led to my experimentation process with songwriting. And I feel like a lot of that translates today with how I approach data viz. I think of myself as like a scientist in a lab, and I'm constantly experimenting. Some things are awful, some things work, but it doesn't matter. You know, if you're vulnerable enough, take chances, anything can happen. So I wanted to share a work of when I was learning D3. I was coming from an R background. D3, it can be very intimidating with a steep learning curve for anybody who's ventured into D3. But one thing that I really love about working with observable notebooks was there were so many examples that I got to see and kind of play around with. So I want to share something where I was looking at other people's notebooks and cobbling code together to kind of create my own thing. So here, let me go ahead and share. All right. So of course I was inspired by Mike Bostock, the father of D3 here. I've got to give him a shout out. And one thing that I often saw with B-swarm charts was it was like a labeling challenge of how could I get labels around it without it kind of overlapping with other points. And I saw in one of his notebooks that he talks about how to position text within circles and align it within it. And I thought, okay, this should be a fun thing. And then underneath the hood, when I was examining his code, I was like, wow, there's a lot more math than I anticipated with the line heights, trying to center it perfectly. Then you're scaling it with the font family that you're using. So it was a really humbling experience learning from Mike's code. And then I also learned from Chris Henrich's notebook about movement with B-swarm charts. And I really wanted to try that out because I thought that was awesome. So an example of movement. Here you can see it like repositioning and flowing. So by no means is this like an amazing data viz. It was just kind of sharing my learning process of how I would look at other people's notebooks, try it out with my own code, thinking about like a fun play data set. Here we've got NBA players. So if I'm looking at, 3 points made, of course, Steph Curry is like the standout here, is like the outlier. But also just kind of a fun thing to play around with text of like, how can I show text and represent it? That probably took me the longest time. So yeah, I would say play around, sample things. If you're learning something new, it's always great to see what other people are doing. And then you get to do your own mashups of concepts and ideas.
Great. Thanks, Tanya. Yeah. For me, learning data viz was like a similar experience where I would just see somebody who had done something that I couldn't. And then because they were so generous with sharing their code or an example, I was able to like kind of first do the thing and then be so excited that I learned the thing. It reminds me, Shirley, actually a couple of years ago, you spoke at an Observable Insight event and you said something that stuck with me since, which was like, I might not be able to do the things that I dream of today, but I'm going to keep dreaming of those things because eventually I'll have the skills or the examples that I need to be able to do that thing, which has always stuck with me that like, yeah, don't like abandon your dreams of things because you can't do it now. That's how we all start. And then like pull from generous communities and examples and books. So until we're able to create those things of our dreams. Thank you all for sharing these examples. This was, yeah, really, really awesome to see. I'm glad we got to spend time seeing your beautiful work that really has each of you embedded in it. So we've talked, this is like our last question before a quick wrap up and then Q&A. We've talked about like your personal perspective being in data viz, making hard choices based on your audience and all the different chart types that you have access to or the ability to make. But on top of that, there's also the challenge of sometimes, like Kelsey showed us, but not all the time, you are usually also working with other people, whether that's for a client or for an individual or for an organization. So I wanted to ask you all a question about collaboration, which is something that you all have like a ton of experience in, which is collaboration can often lead to like better results at the end, but can also be challenging. Like if there's mixed messaging, changing scope creep, for example. So how, when you are working on building visualizations long-term for people, how do you balance like your creative process with the expectations and demands from stakeholders, which might also be shifting as you're working on something? I see some knowing nods. I feel like you all might have something to say. So whoever wants to jump in.
All right, I volunteer as tribute. I'll take a stab at it. So oftentimes, and at least in my day-to-day, I'm working directly with clients. And as Allison mentioned, scope creep happens a lot. You know, you can go in there and try to scope it, and then you end up with something completely different at the end. So I think feedback that I would give myself at the very beginning of my freelancing journey is get things out quick and iterate. Mm-hmm. Don't try to aim for perfection. Oftentimes, I feel like most people know what they don't want versus what they do want. So when you put things out in front of them, you're creating conversations. And then the second piece of advice is, it's actually a quote I'm borrowing from the writing industry, which is murder your darlings. You got to be willing to murder your darlings. So if there's something that you're really passionate about, like, oh, this is really cool. Like, you know, in writing, there's something like a paragraph you've written that you really love. It's flowery language, but it doesn't serve the narrative or the greater like focal point of your story. You have to be willing to part ways with it, even if you're like super passionate and there's personal attachment. So yeah, those would be my 2 tips.
Great, thanks, Tanya. I love how you're going. Okay, Shirley or Kelsey, anything to add? Shirley?
I guess I'll jump in really quick. Painfully true, but fully agree with Tanya about killing your darlings. That took me a very long time to learn. I think the one thing I want to add is when I first went freelance a long time ago, my mentor gave me probably one of the best advice I've ever received, which is, I think I asked something silly like, how do I make sure I don't get sued or something like that? And he was like, just don't work with assholes. And I was like, that's fair. And so how that's actually kind of manifested over the years for me is like, I thankfully have not been sued, knock on wood. But also more importantly, it means that I'm very, very conscious very early on, even like in the email process of like, if I feel like a client is going to be like really nice to work with versus not nice to work with. And the most important thing for me is like I think respect and trust for each other, of like that I can respect them and trust them for their domain expertise, and they also vice versa, which makes then the like negotiation in the design process much smoother, because then like I can be like, these are all the reasons why I'm recommending this design, and then like, you know, they might push back, they might agree. So that's probably the most important part in terms of the client work. And then I actually also want to address a little bit about collaborators, as in like peers, of like something that I've been really enjoying making art. I make art in Tokyo. And something I've been really enjoying about that process is, I think that in America, a lot, I know I'm guilty of this, is like I tend to be very like, you know, the individual exceptionalism, and like I want to be able to do absolutely everything myself, which is how I got to the place of like, I've taught myself, I think, most of what I can about the whole process of making a data visualization. And I know a lot of people have. And I think that that's really, really served me very well in my career. But being in Japan, which is like a very like communal driven society where like people team up to make big things, it's been really exciting to have the prospect of being able to team up with other people, other artists, to work on something a lot bigger that I by myself cannot possibly. And that sort of collaboration is what I'm really, really excited about recently.
Love it. Thank you, Shirley. Okay, I think we are getting close to the time where we'll hop into Q&A. I did want to close with one final question, which is a lightning round question, which actually relates to a question that a person put in the chat about like guidance to an early career person in data visualization. So that's great. So to wrap up this part of the panel, in 10 to 15 seconds, can you share what's one thing you wish you had learned earlier in your data viz career? And for this one, I'll start with Tanya.
Find community. I was on an island for a while. My first data viz community was the Tidy Tuesday crew. Shout out to my R fans out there. And it's just amazing how much you can learn and accelerate your growth when you're in a room filled with the right people, be it virtual or physical space.
Absolutely. And Tanya has been one of those people for me. So back at you. Thanks, Tanya. All right, Kelsey, one thing you wish you had learned earlier in your data viz career?
Yeah, I would say, I alluded to it earlier, I would say the power of low code solutions to kind of like quickly create things. Like you don't have to create everything from scratch all the time.
Absolutely. All right, Shirley, one thing you wish you'd learned earlier in your data viz career?
Yeah, echoing both Tanya and Kelsey, don't try to do everything by yourself. Just don't.
Perfect. Period. All right. So thank you all so much for, the discussion of these questions. We have a number of really great questions that have been coming through in the chat. So we're going to hop into the live Q&A part of this webinar. If you have more questions, feel free to add them. We're going to, I think, probably spend about 7-8 minutes on questions. So we'll see how many we get through. We have some really good ones. I am going to start with this one, which I love, which is compelling visualizations are fantastic, but sometimes when you're presenting or conducting academic research, you have a responsibility to present nuanced or balanced stories. Do any of you have lessons learned when maybe you took something too far down a creative or experimental path, and then maybe working with clients or collaborators learned a lesson about pulling it back? Great question. Thanks for that, John.
I do, where I think a lot of business-oriented clients always want something that's faster to fast to read, which is very fair because they don't have time to dig into something really, really complex. This is not a non-answer. This is just my wish for our world, which is I would like to live in a world where sorry, can you pull up the question once again? I want to see the exact phrasing.
Yes. Let me get it back.
Sorry.
No.
I would like to eventually live in a world where compelling visuals and nuanced or balanced stories are one and the same, and they don't have to seem like, polar opposites of each other. Or compelling or creative or experimental can also be the same as the nuanced or balanced, which I think there are times when it is. So I would like to see a world when that is one and the same.
Great. Thanks, Shirley. Okay. This is an interesting question, especially since we have all of you on this call are also educators, which we have not talked about, but like workshop leaders, adjunct professors. So this is a great question, which is from Andreas. Thanks, Andreas. As a university instructor teaching data visualization, what strategies can I use to inspire my students to be more creative in their projects while still adhering to clear, objective grading criteria? Great question.
This is something that I have been thinking about a lot. I know that there are probably a lot of different ways. The rubrics are very difficult to get around, so I completely feel you on that question. What I did, just as a very small step in that direction, is kind of having things that are not simply coded solutions. It was a little bit tricky for me because most of my class is a coding class. My students are comp sci students, but I think asking for techniques like sketches, I think, is a really big one. And I think that's a really good middle ground because you kind of could have a rubric to grade a sketch, like legend, like proper use of color. But students are naturally being more creative and thinking on the page, kind of having that flexibility of thought, as opposed to if they had to just figure out like a coded solution. So I think that's a good balance. Some other things, like when I was teaching color and accessibility, I think bringing in add-on questions to kind of coded solutions, which are, again, very easy to have rubrics for, things around, how would you, like what additions would you give to this chart if you were trying to, make it, one of the things was if you needed to print the chart in black and white, how would you distinguish between like different series? So things that get students thinking beyond just the defaults. And then you obviously have certain solutions that, dashed strokes and stuff like that can be graded. So those were some of the things that I've been thinking about this semester.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kelsey. I know that like rubrics, when it's based on creative things, is so hard. So thanks for sharing, some of those insights you have from working on that this semester.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I think we have time for one more question, and we almost made it through this webinar without talking about AI, but no more. All right. Last question. Thank you. Rajiv, is what could be the effects of AI on data visualization? So I would love to hear your quick thoughts on how might it benefit data viz? What are you excited about, or what are you not excited about? Everything on the table.
Oh, and here I thought we were almost out of the clear without AI, but at the very beginning of the AI hype, I was a little bit hesitant to jump on the AI train. I have no doubt that AI is going to be able to produce a beautiful data visualization. I mean, you already have tools that do it. They're creating bar charts, they're creating pie charts, you name it. AI hasn't reached that point of cognition. We're not at the AGI level of AI yet. And I think the part of data visualization that is always going to need some kind of human element is the comprehension, the critical reasoning, the context that you bring to the table with what question you're trying to answer. I use AI. I'm not ashamed to say I use AI in my day-to-day when I'm learning things. It's an easy way to pick up new skills. But I don't think it's going to replace the creative process, and it's not going to replace critical thinking anytime soon. So I would always say, make sure you're honing those abilities. You use AI as a stencil in your artistic work, but it's just one piece of the puzzle, and there's so much more to it.
Also, I completely agree with you, Tanya. And I think what I've found recently as well, I also use AI. It's so helpful, especially when navigating, huge code bases. It also doesn't replace the years of experience, for sure. I think sometimes, a lot of the time, the first solution that AI would come up with about how to implement a specific, feature on a chart, I know that that's not the best thing to do. And then I have to prompt it, what about this? And then eventually it gets to the point where it gives me the answer that I know is, yes, this is what I want to implement. And you only get that through the trying, failing, going through that, the experience of a career, of a professional life.
Yeah, I fully agree with the both of you. And I think the only thing I want to add in is, I'm really excited about AI in terms of qualitative data, and what it can do for analyzing qualitative data or quantifying qualitative data. Outside of that, I like to joke that our field is still niche enough that no AI, no OpenAI, OpenAI and Anthropic and all of those don't really care enough to train on our code to replace us. So I think for now, our nicheness makes me feel like I have job security. But to add on to that, one of my friends asked me a few months ago if I feel like AI might take my job. And straight away, my answer was no. No hesitation, just no. Because I think that AI is really great at that 80%, that first 80% of coming up with maybe suggesting what chart type, maybe even getting you the right chart type really quickly with only a few sentences. But where I really, really enjoy is that last 20% of, like Tanya said, I think figuring out the right questions, figuring out what might really resonate with other humans. And that's that 20% is not something that AI has quite figured out yet. If anything, I feel more excitingly threatened by other humans, other practitioners in our field that are, more and more doing amazing work. I think they're going to take away my job. And I think that's, it's a complicated feeling because I think that's really exciting. And I will love for other humans to take away my job, but also please don't take away too much of it. So please leave enough for me to just make a humble living for myself. Thank you so much.
I love it. Here's to hoping that humans take some of our jobs. I love these responses. That's I really like these optimistic answers about what AI can and can't do. I think is really exciting to think about. All right, well, that gets us to the end of our time today. I really want to thank Kelsey, Tanya, and Shirley for joining us. It was so awesome hearing more about your processes, your perspectives, your incredible expertise and experience on balancing creativity and data analysis for data visualizations. Thank you all so, so much for being a part of this panel. It was really inspiring and exciting to hear from you all. I also want to thank everyone else who has attended today. It was great to see such incredible turnout, such great questions and responses in the chat. Just a heads up, we have more exciting webinars coming up soon, including one on December 4th with leading data journalists on storytelling with graphics from raw data to reader impact, which will be hosted by our very own Will Chase. So if you want to check out what's on the horizon, you can go to observablehq.com where you can see and register for our upcoming events or sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on what we're working on and what's coming up next. thank you again so much to our panelists. Thank you all for joining, and we will really look forward to seeing you all at the next one. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.